Grimora.
Snow had been falling over the town since late afternoon, spreading a thin, unbroken layer across the streets and softening the edges of the brick buildings that framed the small central square. Streetlights cast pale circles onto the empty sidewalks. Holiday decorations hung from lampposts and shop windows, strings of muted white bulbs and simple wreaths, their brightness reduced by the steady curtain of snow. It was Christmas Eve, and most residents had already retreated inside, leaving the town center nearly still. Eli Warner parked his car on a side street and stepped out, closing the door with a quiet motion. He pulled his scarf closer and listened to the muffled sounds of the snow settling. The square lay ahead of him, marked by a single intersection where two main roads met. A traffic light stood at the center, its three lamps cycling through their pattern with steady rhythm, red to green to yellow, then back again. No cars waited at the junction, no pedestrians crossed. He had driven back from the city to visit his parents for the holiday and had left their house for a short walk to clear his thoughts before midnight. They lived only a few blocks from the square. The town looked smaller than he remembered, its outlines softened by time and distance. He crossed past the closed post office and the darkened diner, both familiar shapes from his early years. The digital clock on the bank sign at the corner read 11:42. The temperature display beneath it showed a number below freezing that continued to drift downward. Snow moved in slow currents across the empty road, gathering near the curbs and along the steps of the buildings. A single string of lights in an apartment window across from the square blinked in a steady sequence. Eli walked to the edge of the intersection and stopped beneath one of the lampposts. The traffic light changed from green to yellow to red above him, its cycle unbroken. He watched the empty lanes extend in all four directions. Long ago, this corner had been busier, with cars passing through regularly and people waiting at the crosswalk, even in winter. One incident at this intersection had changed how the town spoke about it, though that conversation rarely surfaced now. Years earlier, on another December night, a teenager named Mara had been walking home from her job at a small grocery store a few blocks away. Witnesses later said she had been standing at this very crosswalk, waiting for the light to change so she could cross the street. An oncoming vehicle had swerved on the icy road and slid through the intersection. Afterward, accounts became fragmented. Some people said they saw her step forward and vanish between the parked cars. Others claimed she had been struck and thrown out of sight into the snow near the curb. Emergency crews found tire tracks, a broken section of curb, and one glove in the snow. They did not find her. The town installed a new traffic light system after that winter, with longer red cycles and caution alerts displayed near the approaches. Some residents said the intersection felt heavier afterward, as if an unseen presence observed each car that passed through. The story faded under more immediate concerns, but certain patterns remained. Eli remembered hearing pieces of that story before he left for college and later work. Returning now, he felt its outline more than its details. The silence of the square seemed to rest on top of something that had not finished its movement. Snow continued to fall around him, the flakes bright in the streetlight beams. He walked slowly along the corner, leaving clear footprints in the fresh layer, then stopped across from the traffic light. The signals continued their regular cycle, red for the north-south direction, green for the east-west lanes, then red across all lanes for a brief pause before the next cycle. Normally, one direction would soon turn green again. This time, the light did not change. The red lamps in all four faces remained lit. The control box at the base of the pole emitted a faint electrical buzz, then fell silent. The cycle stopped. All lights held red at the same time, steady and unblinking. Eli watched without moving. A quiet pressure seemed to settle over the intersection, like air thickening above the asphalt. Snow fell more slowly, each flake visible as it drifted through the red light's reflection. The intersection, which had already been empty, now felt suspended. A sound began at the far end of one of the streets leading into the square. It was soft at first, easily misunderstood for wind shifting around a corner. Then it gained definition. Footsteps, measured and even, approached along the sidewalk. The rhythm suggested a single person walking at a normal pace, boots pressing into snow. No figure appeared. The footsteps drew closer, passing through the dim light of the side street lamps, then entering the clearer field of the main square. Each footfall left no visible imprint on the sidewalk. The snow there remained untouched, yet the sound continued, distinct and regular. The footsteps reached the corner opposite Eli, where a person would normally stand to wait for the light. They stopped exactly at the edge of the curb, aligned with the crossing lines, now mostly buried under snow. The traffic lights above remained red in all directions. The stopwatch function on the control box should have triggered a change by now, but no shift occurred. The stillness deepened. The footsteps resumed, moving forward into the crosswalk. This time, footprints appeared. They formed in the snow one by one, where the sound suggested a weight pressing down. The impressions matched the size of a winter boot, deep enough to indicate an adult. The prints crossed the lane nearest the curb, then the center of the intersection, then the far lane. The red lights did not change. All four directions held steady. Eli watched the empty crosswalk fill with these new marks. The prints remained clear, not yet blurred by ongoing snowfall. The steps reached the opposite curb and paused. The sound stopped. The prints ended at the edge of the sidewalk. He felt the distinct sense that someone was standing there, still and waiting, though he could see no shape where a body should have been. The red glow from the traffic signal continued to spread across the intersection. A faint, distant chime carried through the air. It was the bell from the small church 2 blocks away, ringing the hour. The sound reached the square, slightly delayed by distance, each tone overlapping with the soft fall of snow. On the first chime, the footsteps started again, this time moving parallel to the sidewalk, following the edge of the square. The prints extended along the path in front of one closed shop after another. They passed the darkened diner, the post office, and the pharmacy, then turned at the corner and moved along the next block. The sound of the steps remained steady. When the bell finished its 12th and final chime, the footprints stopped in front of a narrow space between 2 buildings where a side alley opened toward the back. The presence, still invisible, seemed to direct its attention there. For a moment, he thought he detected a faint movement in the air, as if the snow just above the ground shifted in a different pattern. The red lights in all directions remained fixed. Eli stepped closer to the curb on his side of the intersection. His own boots compressed the snow with a clear track. He did not walk into the center of the road. He stayed near the lamppost, watching. The unseen figure turned back toward the intersection. The footprints began to retrace their path along the sidewalk, returning to the crosswalk where they had first appeared. This time, as each step moved forward, the previous impressions faded. By the time the figure reached the curb again, the first sets of prints had nearly vanished, as if softened by a faster rate of snowfall in those locations. The steps moved back into the crosswalk. Footprints formed again across the lanes, matching the earlier pattern. When they reached the far side and arrived at the place where the initial sequence had started, they stopped. The sound ceased. The new prints held their shape for several moments. The red lights flickered at the edges, then resumed their normal cycle. One direction turned green, then yellow, then red. The control box hummed with regular rhythm again. The intersection regained its usual timing. Whatever had held the system at all red released its hold. Within minutes, the falling snow began to fill the footprints. The outlines grew softer. The surface of the road and the corners of the sidewalks started to look uniform again. The square retained its ordinary appearance, lit by lampposts and quiet windows. Eli stayed where he was until the bank clock showed 12:07. No more footsteps sounded, no new prints formed. A single car rolled slowly through the intersection, its tires pushing snow aside with a muted sound. The driver did not appear to notice anything unusual. The vehicle followed the green light and turned past the square. He crossed the side street back toward his parents' neighborhood, glancing once more at the traffic signal. It cycled through its sequence without error, red to green to yellow, then back to red again. At the corner near the church, he paused and listened. The bell tower remained silent now. A light in one of the houses across from the church flicked off. Snow collected along the gutters in tree branches. The town seemed to have returned fully to its ordinary state. Later that night, as he lay awake in his old bedroom, he thought about the path the footprints had taken and how they had stopped at the alleyway between the two buildings. He remembered that years earlier, people searching for Mara had speculated that if she had left the crosswalk, she might have cut through that very alley to reach home faster. No one had ever confirmed that line of movement. It had remained only a suggestion. In the years that followed, others in town would occasionally report seeing odd activity at the intersection on certain December nights. Lights holding red longer than usual, faint footsteps on empty sidewalks, marks in the snow that seemed to appear and fade without clear cause. The reports rarely made it into any official record, and most residents chose not to dwell on them. Each Christmas Eve near midnight, when snow lay over the roads and the square had emptied, the pattern would return. The traffic lights would hold red in all directions at once. Footsteps would cross under the red glow, leaving a temporary path from one side of the town's main intersection to the other, as if someone still finished the walk they had begun years before.